What do we mean by keep it holy?
Well, let's go back to the Lord is holy, and we're to be like him. And the essence of holiness in Hebrew, Janice, you'd have to come in again, is the set-apartness.
Correct.
The distinct uniqueness of it. Now, in English, my growing up, it became a sort of uncomfortable form of goody-goodiness.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then holier than thou.
Right, right.
But that idea of distinct, you could say, countercultural set-apartness.
Yeah.
We should be countercultural people.
That's it. You hit it on the nose. Baseball is every day. Scrabble with the family is not every day. They would never play it if it were not Shabbat.
So part of it is that it should be, it's bounded in some sense from the activities that characterize the banalities
now, I was
of the
going
week.
to say to Stephen, my wife says to me, emails drive you, and reading a certain type of book drives me, and things. So she bans that totally. And I kicked for a while, but I do no emails on Sunday.
True, yes.
And I don't read certain, sort of.
So it has to be set apart. So it has to be others.
I'll read
other
fiction.
than.
I'll
Right,
read
other than
fiction.
and higher than.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Right, so because we talked about the utility of ritual, and part of what we're hashing out here is the idea that in some sense the Sabbath is a ritual of not engaging in your normal sacrificial rituals. Mm-hmm. And so then what do you think about the idea that engaging in creative endeavor? I mean, because God is obviously, in some fundamental sense, a creator.
Right, but you can't create on Shabbat.
Kids, that's it.
The only
It's
thing
a
you
day
can
of rest
create
from
on Shabbat is a
creation.
baby.
It's a day of rest even from creation.
Well, I love the fact that the Hebrew, he rested. You get the idea in English, we need a breather.
Yeah.
Put my feet up a bit, I'm exhausted. Whereas the Hebrew, I understand, is completion, gratification, satisfaction. The creation was good.
Well, so I'm curious about this part because it's not exactly obvious to me that I know how to rest. I don't know what it means. Well, I mean that. I mean
yeah,
that.
we know, Jordan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I get engaged, I just seem to get engaged in some other frenetic
but back
activity.
to Genesis saying God created the world not by chance. You could say, and not through us only. That old cartoon, who will take care of the world after I've gone?
That's a good point.
We all think it all depends on me more than it really does. And Sabbath is saying, no, the Lord created it. I only
so
have a
you
small
said
part.
set-apartness, but you also said something like
it doesn't depend
reflective
on you.
gratitude.
Jordan, doesn't depend on you. Doesn't depend on me. And that's part of the humility that Stephen introduced earlier.
The problem is when they capture you.
The subordination.
Right, and so it's not about like trying to figure out if I'm sinning or not sinning. Like if I go to confession, I ask forgiveness for all the sins I've done, voluntary and involuntary. It's like I'm sinning all the time. If you want to know, like every all day long I'm sinning. But
that's why you're so much fun.
That's why I'm so much fun.
So in the ancient world, the parts I know about, and I don't know much about Hammurabi, I'd be astonished if Hammurabi said, "It's because I say this that this is the case," right? Because that obviously. If a claim that this is so will run up against the reality of it, and it'll either reinforce that reality or it will be subject to refutation by reality. And see, I think all of this, these beautiful things in the Ten Commandments, see, here am I talking for Dennis now, right? Because he lives this life and knows it very well. But as I say, most of my teachers are Jews. These are like, in this text, like the detailed commands that seem boring to everybody. And what Leon Kass says about this, another Jewish teacher of mine, whose book, by the way, what's the name of it?
God's Nation.
Founding God's Nation. It's just a wonderful book. Have you read that book, Dennis?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you like it?
I've had him on, and look, he's terrific. Do we agree on everything? We're two Jews.
Yeah. Churchill said, wherever there are 3 Jews, there are 2 prime ministers and 1 leader of the opposition.
Oh, that's very funny. I never heard that one.
But the point is, these poor people are being marked out for a demonstration of God's providence. And it's hard duty. And they have to demonstrate visibly in public so we can see, right? And then when they fall short, we can see that too. And there are punishments for that. It's, you know, the worst thing that can befall a people is to get chosen.
Well, we could also point out too is that people have a
there's no life. You can't.
there's no
everything else is
community if you
subordinate.
eat each other.
Well, exactly. And so the other ones are going to be further elaborations of what life can be if you have it. But why is the next one, thou shalt not commit adultery? I mean, and just to ask the simple question, why does that matter?
Well, you might say, if you're a biologist, you'd say, well, survival and reproduction. I mean, those are the two fundamental, what would you say, necessities of propagating life.
But you can reproduce perfectly well through adultery.
Not if you get killed for doing it. Or children get killed.
Not if you're married.
Yeah.
By the way, you'll find this fascinating. The 4 prohibitions, murder, adultery, stealing, and false witness. In certain circumstances, they are all capital offenses. And that's the reason they're in the 10 Commandments. So let me very quickly explain. Murder is obvious, life for a life, and only if it's premeditated. Adultery, which needs 2 witnesses, it never happened in reality that we know of, but nevertheless, it is a capital offense under certain circumstances. Stealing, kidnapping is. Stealing property is not a capital offense. Mm-hmm. That's part of the way they know that it actually meant stealing a life. And the 4th one is one I love. Yeah. In the Torah itself, this is not later. Mm-hmm. What if you bear false witness, you are given the punishment that would have been meted out had you been believed. Mm-hmm. So that if I testify that you committed murder, and I perjured myself, I am executed. Mm-hmm. I wish we had that law today, that you are given the punishment for perjury that would have been meted out had we believed you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is, part of what's...
Clean up the social media.
Well, part of what's pathologized social media...
Oh, forgive me.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I just want to, this is way back, a good 10 minutes ago, you mentioned something. And I just have to state, I do believe in the divinity of the 5 books of the Torah, and divinity and permanence of a law are not identical. It could be a divinely given law, and yet I just quickly want to give one example that is not in Exodus, which strikes most readers as bizarre, and I think it is brilliant. If a man suspects his wife of adultery, he brings him to the priest, who gives her a potion, and if her belly swells, she's guilty. And if it doesn't swell, she's innocent, and they go back to one another. His suspicions are assuaged, and hopefully they will reconcile and have a good marriage. It is obviously, we don't do this today. They stopped doing this by the time of Jesus.
Lost the formula for that potion.
Right. We don't know. What is clear to me is this was God's way of getting husbands not to be suspicious of their wives. It was a way to keep the couple together. I don't believe any woman's belly ever blew up when this potion was given, but it was a genius way. Remember, this is late Bronze Age. What is divine? Keeping the couple together, assuaging the husband's suspicions, keeping his dignity because now she's shown to be innocent, and the fact that God wants couples to stay together. Why is that not divine?
I'll tell you a story that just popped into my mind. A woman told me this story when I was in Europe. She was in a city in the Middle East, a naive American tourist, and she was walking back to her encampment, and a man stopped and offered her a ride to the encampment, and foolishly she got in the car. And he took her out in the desert, and he told her that he had been terribly abused as a child and that he was going to rape her. And he took her into the desert and was preparing to do so, stripped her and laid her on the ground. And when he climbed on top of her, she took him in her arms and told him that she loved him. And he broke down and cried and stopped. And so that's a good example. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Because she got under him. In the psychological sense, right? She could even she managed, even in that moment of extremity, to look past his voluntary adoption of malevolence and evil, right, and to grab him by the heart and to pull him out of that abyss. And so
it wouldn't have worked with Hitler's or Stalin's torturers.
Hey,
it's critically that it's a great story. I almost cry listening to it. I've never heard it.
It's an amazing story.
But I'm not sure there's much to be extrapolated in the nature of human evil.
Well, it's always an open question, Dennis, because I think it depends to some degree on the canniness of the interlocutor. You know, I would say that if you're going to entice someone malevolent back onto the path of proper being, you have to be as canny in your good as they are in their evil. That's an echo of the notion that you should be as wise as a serpent, right? As harmless as a dove and as wise as a serpent. And I don't know what the limit to that is, because I've seen people in extreme situations walk the path so precisely that they could entice even someone hell-bent on malevolence out of that that insistence. I mean, I take your point. This is no simple matter, and it's nothing for the naive to attempt. But it's always an open question. You know, even when someone comes after you, how much of the outcome is in your control? And the answer is, to some degree, that's proportionate to the depth of your wisdom. So,
with the caveat that if you run across Adolf Hitler, it's probably a good idea to shoot him.
Well,
one little additional thought. I have spoken on campuses by sheer coincidence on some occasions, not most, but on some. It was Sex Week, which virtually every American campus has. I assume Canadian campuses have as well. And the campus is sort of drenched in sexual discussions, exhibitions, etc. And
I'm naive. I never heard of Sex Week.
Well, you're at Hillsdale.
You're at Hillsdale, yeah. There's no Sex Week at Hillsdale.
Week, yeah. But if Hillsdale has Sex Week, invite me.
We agree with the authoritative and where it comes from, but if you say tyrannical, you undermine.
I agree with you totally. I only used it because Jordan
what?
did, and you meant to.
Sure,
yes.
make it my fault.
Yeah, no.
So if the
one answer to your,
that was precious.
You're right. The medieval rabbis, I've read that too. But the opposition points out that the people buy into it in Exodus before they hear the details.
We will do and we will observe, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to?
All the Lord says we will do.
And then they rebelled the rest of the Bible.
There's actually two interpretations, right? So in the traditional Jewish commentaries, one interpretation is that they drank, everything's fine. And then the other one is they committed a major sin. Because as we will see, pretty much everybody who participates in this entire process ends up dying, except for Joshua and Moses at the very end, right? So actually, Nadav and Avihu end up approaching God later on in the Bible, and they do so in an unapproved way because they think that they're closer to God than they actually are, and God ends up killing them with a foreign fire, right? That ends up happening in the book of Leviticus. So one of the reads actually in this section that I think makes some sense is that what's happening here, and it leads up to the golden calf, is that the people are as close to God as they've ever been, and they start thinking that they know more about God than they actually know about God. And so they go up onto the mountain. They're supposed to be left behind gradually. Instead, they sit there, they have a big meal, and they have this vision of God in which they see God resting on the sapphire. Now, Jonathan, as you were saying, the sapphire tends to reflect light back up, correct? Right. So, but they think that they're seeing God. What they're actually seeing is not God, right? There's a barrier between them and God. And so they're not willing to acknowledge that barrier. And so this is going to set the stage for what's to happen next, which is they think, okay, well, Moses is gone, right? Moses disappeared, he's up the mountain, as we'll find out. And we can handle this, right? And God specifically says that they should pretty much stick around at the base of the mountain. They don't stick around at the base of the mountain. They go down back into the people, and the sin of the golden calf happens.
So the lesson is Jews don't give Jews the benefit of the doubt.
So I mean, if you do during the course of the Bible, you're going to end up in the wrong place pretty much every time.
So let me offer a thought that has been central to my understanding of life. Everything is holy in this. The curtains are holy, the priests are holy, the sacrifices are holy. Everything is holy until you get to the Holy of Holies. And what's in the Holy of Holies? The Ten Commandments. So my read is the holy protects the ethical. Our society has completely lost the concept of the holy, and as a result, we have lost ethics.
It's a source of the ethical, you could say.
Oh, I don't say that.
Okay.
I'm okay with it, but I'm saying it very precisely as it protects it. And I always
You
like
mean
to
the
give
outside
balance
structure?
that.
No.
The-
I'll give you a perfect, what I think is a perfect example. You may not agree. I remember being stunned when people started cursing publicly. Having come from a yeshiva religious background, Ben would have the very similar response, and maybe even someone from a strongly Christian background. That we understood people say expletives, etc., but that it became normative in society. To me, that was James Q. Wilson's Broken Windows. To me, the holy is the window that's broken. When you break the holy, you don't immediately break the ethical. Secular people think we don't need holy stuff. That's nonsense. We just need ethics. But it's not true. That's why I say it protects the ethical. Holy, 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 10 Commandments.
You know, I could tell you something interesting about curse words that bears on that. So there's a neurological condition, Tourette syndrome, that compels people to swear, or it actually disinhibits swearing. And you might think, how in the world can you have a neurological condition that makes you swear? Well, swear words are 4-letter words. They're guttural utterances. You have a different circuit that swears. It's almost the purest combination of unmediated emotion with language. And when you swear, you're actually using the circuit that animals use to signal the presence of predators. So if a monkey sees a jaguar and it has a jaguar utterance, it's really a curse, and it alerts all the other monkeys to the fact that the jaguar's there, and it has an implication for action. And what happens in Tourette's is the structure that would integrate or inhibit that more primordial linguistic system is not functioning. And so what it means is that as the curse words re-enter the lexicon, it's the collapse of the integration structure that keeps those animal utterances under control. That's literally what's happening.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd
And
like
in
to
the jungle,
offer-
that's another reason for the jaguar to eat the monkey.
What's that?
That's another reason for the jaguar to eat the monkey.
Because he's being cursed. Yes, absolutely.
I want to give another
They have a different
example.
swear word for eagles than for
In addition to
jaguars.
cursing, I'll give you another, because people need to hear examples, because they don't understand. The secular society has no notion of the holy.
Are these
San
examples
Franci-
of curse words, Dennis?
No, I'm going to another one. San Francisco City Council had a debate a few years ago on whether or not to keep laws against public nudity.
Right.
And by one vote, they voted to keep it, and their rationale was a completely secular one, and that was health. That naked people sitting on a bench, it wouldn't be healthy, and we can't rely on them to all sit on a towel. And so on my show, I said, there is only one reason to ban public nudity, and that is that the human being is not an animal. Animals are naked, humans are clothed. That's a religious concept. There is no secular argument against public nudity. Call me up with a secular argument against public nudity. By the way, then as you know, all the left-wing sites, Prager says
in favor of public nudity.
Close, yes. Well, Prager says there are no secular arguments against public nudity. I'm for public nudity, exactly. But it's so important for people to understand, and even my listeners, many of whom have a religious background, it was news to them. Oh, there really is only a religious holy argument against public nudity.
Well,
there is no
Well, there's an
secular
aesthetic
argument.
one,
But
too.
here's the thing.
Well, okay, fair enough. In some cases.
One of the arguments that I read that was quite compelling from the gay community itself against the idea of gay marriage was that if you move the fringe to the center, all the utility of the fringe disappears. And there's special utility in the fringe, but it is utility of exceptionality. It's not utility of inclusiveness. And the other problem, too, is if you move the fringe to the center, you're faced with the problem that turns out, boys and girls, the fringe has fringes. And so you think you've got a fringe to deal with when the center is the center. You wait till the fringe is the center,
right, yeah.
and then you're going to see Ontario school teachers with 78 quadruple D breasts and gigantic nipples going to shop class.
And not in a good way.
Right? Yeah.